So we have item 10, which is our investment committee work plan for fiscal year 14-15 review. I wanted, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna, this is your item. One of the things Sharon had asked me to look at was the big challenge is you had two work projects for this year, the shortfall risk and the ESG sustainability overview. We were suggesting you're gonna have to bump those because the asset allocation is so big and so heavy. Sharon asked if we could keep the ESG sustainability standards on there. Having given that some thought, I think we can. We just have to recognize you just don't have enough time during the day to do two major projects, and I don't think we actually have the staff resources to pull off two major projects. But if we could, if you want, it's up to you, but leave that ESG sustainability standards on there as a project, just recognize it would mostly be accomplished through the investment insight program with speakers and education rather than, research and time and effort. But this is your work plan, it's up to you.
What I was going to add to that and what I wanted to let the board members know about is, when we voted on the two things we wanted to focus on this year and sustainability, and I know there's been a lot of conversation this week with the board around sustainability. One of the things coming out of our offsite that Harry and I talked to Jack about was the idea of, the conversation has been, what is sustainability? I think we have 10 probably different approaches or definitions of that. And so we've asked Mercer and to come and do some consulting work with us. And so what's going to happen is board members, I believe investment staff, I believe executive staff, and I do know our members, teachers as well, are going to be receiving kind of like a questionnaire, if you will, from Mercer to kind of gauge all of our perceptions and understandings of what we think sustainability means so that we can kind of, this conversation sort of help us frame a conversation together as a board as we move forward. So I wanted to let you know, I did speak with the consultant from Mercer the other day, and she's going to be sending out emails at the end of February. So you can anticipate as board members, as staff, that you'll be getting a questionnaire about that. And then I think we mentioned in the board education item that Harry and I are going to be traveling with Jack and Chris and visiting some of our partners in London and in Amsterdam and talking to trustees who are looking at sustainability and also talking to our current partners around sustainability and bringing that information back and sharing that with the board. So.
And she also wants to do personal interviews with
Oh,
board
I'm sorry.
members
So,
too.
yeah, so there's two parts to the Mercer piece. Is a questionnaire that that board members will receive, but also interviews, which I know she's thinking either phone or in-person interviews with board members, investment staff, executive staff of CalSTRS. Tom.
As someone who is actually quite passionate and have been an active investor in the environmental side of it, which I think occupies an awful lot of the sustainability conversation, it strikes me that unless we have a methodology to put it into our asset allocation and investment policy operation, it's a very hard, it's hard to come up with a tangible set of beliefs, actionable steps, et cetera. And so I'm wondering whether we're kind of getting a little ahead of ourselves, unless there's a methodology to make it part of our very core investment program, which I'd love to see. I mean, no question about that.
I guess even you asking the question today to me is the beginning of that. What I hear from our consultants is that's a lot of work,
Right.
And so as we've been discussing it, we're not in a rush to get there. So I think we could get there, and I think what you're suggesting, Tom, and even your question today is interesting. I guess I'm thinking that we'll take some baby steps in the conversation so we can kind of come up with some common language and then potentially move there. So when you say we're not there yet, I would agree with you. We're not there yet.
but what I'm afraid of is kind of having a dialogue on two tracks, because unless we can integrate it with our investment program in a very meaningful way, we'll find ourselves kind of torn at every meeting between we're inspired about its sustainability. Oh, yeah, we're down into the weeds on basis points of correlation. And I think we have to make it a priority to get it into our core methodology.
Paul?
Yeah, I agree. I think we're having more and more conversation about sustainability, not only in this committee, but it's really come up in virtually every committee we've had this week, this last few days. It came up at ARM, it came up at compensation, and yet I think we don't know what we mean by it, and I think a consultant to interview people is fine. I think that doesn't really get us very far. I mean, we need as a board to agree on what we mean by sustainability and how we want to put it into action. Yes, we've got our 21 risk factors, and yes, we've got a strategic plan. But I think there's a lot of things coming before us that anticipate us or presume we're going to act on them in a much more robust way than we have in the past. And so I think before we do that, I think we need to understand what we mean by sustainability, because I've heard people define sustainability over the last couple of days as, the greenhouse gas, or the carbon footprint of our buildings. And then I've heard it talk about sustainability of the long-term viability of CalSTRS. Well, those could both be concepts, but they're truly different concepts. And to manage to one is very different than to manage to the other. So I think we need to, I agree with Tom that I think we need to be more deliberate about this, that I think it's in our strategic plan. We all agree it's an important factor, but we need to be together about what it means. We need to be together about how we integrate it into what we do, rather than just sort of superimpose it on the way we've already been doing things like investments.
Absolutely.
And so I would just ask that not only for investments, but for everything, that we take that more deliberate approach to understanding what we mean, because I think we've got a lot of confusion on the board right now, and it manifests itself in the conversations we've had the last few days.
Absolutely. Dana?
So, Paul, I'm going to agree with you, but I don't make the same correlation with Tom as you do. I think what I hear you saying is what Sharon has kind of laid out for us, to start laying the foundation of what we all think about sustainability, so we do have common language before we start trying to throw it into an asset mix. I think that's probably more valuable. So, I mean, I totally agree with coming to a common understanding, but I think we have to put that first. I think Tom, if we went the route that you were talking about, it's like putting the cart before the horse. And I think you feel that your view is what we are thinking about doing is putting the cart before the horse, but I really think we need to have that common ground, and I think we need to go into it slowly.
Can I respond?
Sure.
Yeah. I
agree with
just have
Well,
a
it's
feeling
funny,
like
the confusion,
we're
I'm like,
spending
okay.
a disproportionate, relative to our ability to execute, I'm thinking we're spending a disproportionate amount of time and effort until, and as fiduciaries and prudent people on the investment side, which is 90% of what we're dealing with, until there's a generally accepted methodology to begin to address and include sustainable investing in our asset allocations and our investment program. I think we just kind of get ahead of ourselves a little
But
bit.
the question is, how do we get to where you're talking about, Tom? How do we get to talk about it as part of our lens that we look at our investment? Well, we have to start
Well, I
by
think-
having a basic conversation, and
Well-
we haven't had that yet.
Well, we can talk about it as long as we want, but as trustees, until there's a body of analysis that our investment professionals can talk to us about
Right.
and say, you change the risk weighting of certain assets, or you subcategorize equity a little different or something like that, we could have a great understanding of what sustainable businesses look like, but we won't have a way to invest against it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I guess as Paul talks about being deliberate, I think that's actually what we're trying to do. And I'm open as if other people have, if Paul, if you have input on how to be deliberate or ideas, I think Harry, myself, other folks are open to that. I guess to me, it's a process, and we've got to start somewhere to get to what you're talking about, Tom. And I'll let Joy chime in.
I think the only other comment that I'd add is, I think one of the challenges that I feel I wrestle with is among our different committees, it's the investment committee is the only one that I think has identified sustainability as a project that we will work on this year. But as Paul and others have pointed out, it's been an issue that's come up in some of our other committees, whether it's in the concept of auditing, of reporting that we're going to be doing on sustainability in the compensation committee. So I think I see where Tom is coming from, that if we've actually identified this as a project for our current fiscal year work plan, what are we doing to try to bring ourselves to conclusion?
Right.
I don't think that perspective is mutually exclusive from the notion that we need to have consensus around how you develop that, but I think that there might be some disconnects between what's on our work plan and what we're trying to achieve or think we're trying to achieve in the investment committee and how it is emerging in different venues, sometimes because the board has been aware of it and approved it, sometimes it's popping up and sometimes coming up as a surprise of some additional activity we're engaging in.
Right. Harry.
So my experience on the board has shown and proven to me that whenever we embark on any type of initiative, and I think our CIO's approach and our staff's approach, we're very deliberate about what we do. We don't rush into the water, so to speak. So I'm hopeful that we collectively will educate ourselves about what this term means, come to a collective understanding of what it means. But I think part of the work that Sharon and I will be doing with Jack and Chris, my hope is, as a trustee, is to speak with other pension fund trustees that have addressed this issue before us, that have put policies in place that actually gets to what Tom's talking about. What have they done to actually change how they're investing, if at all? So I'm hoping that will be part of the education process, because at the end of the day, 2 years, 3 years from now, if we really haven't changed much, then really kind of what do we do?
Right.
But I think, from my perspective, the risk of not exploring this topic further outweighs the risk of actually us doing this.
I'm not advocating we don't.
No, I know that, Tom.
I'm just thinking we have to keep it in proportion to our.
Absolutely.
What we can deliver. Yeah.
And I hear that from.
And I think what we'll find, I think Alan basically told us, there isn't yet a methodology, and nobody's quite yet done the work. And so we have to continue to monitor that body of learning. And actually, David Blood more or less said it when he was asked that question too.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I guess I'm hoping that the work plan on ESG will in fact be this, that what we're doing is we're figuring out how to incorporate our sustainability goals, sustainability defined broadly, the way David Blood described it, which is ESG, not just environmental, into our investments as a fund with $190 billion, as a fund that is challenged not to be pretty much just reflective of the market, but a fund that operates in a world where people look at our short-term returns, but we are long-term investors because we have long-term liabilities. So it's one thing for, Generation to run a fund where
Right.
they can be a little bit more specific, whether that's scaled up to a fund of our size is, I think, a question we have to ask.
Absolutely.
So I think those are the questions that we need to understand. And that's why I do think the work of our consultants in helping to advise us on that would be really critically important, because, if we want to implement this as more than just a portion of, our investment portfolio where we give some money to Generation and that's that. How do we gain comfort as fiduciaries that we can do that and do right by our members? So
That's a great, yep. So Chris?
So it's an action item. We need you to adopt the revised work plan. If you do want to keep the ESG sustainability on there, the one thing I'm going to point out is we did have to add the private equity consultant interviews. Those are easily 2 to 3 hours in June. And given what you're describing and knowing what's in front of you, I just will this won't be pleasant to say to you, but I need to. April, June, and even July will be very long meetings. So we will need your time and attention. It also means the agenda packets will be very thick because of the research you're requesting. So I love your appetite to challenge you, to deal with these challenging things, but we also need your indulgence that we need to give you the information. So it will be long days.
So I would entertain a motion to approve the work plan.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Great. Thank you, Chris. All right, responsible contractor policy, Mike DeRay.
So coming up is Mike DeRay. Terry, you know these people. Do you want me to introduce them? Mike DeRay and Craig Nyland.
Thanks. Good afternoon. We'd also like to introduce Jean Kagimoto. Jean, can you stand up? Jean is a staff services analyst with the real estate team, and she's been very important in helping Mike and I put the policy provisions together. If you adopt our recommendation to put a web-based job board together, Jean will be critical in the implementation of working with our IT folks on that effort.
So I would give a real quick introduction about the responsible contracting policy, and with a brief history, the real estate team always gives out the responsible contracting policy, although it's something that we're expanding to include infrastructure. And the reason for that is the first responsible contracting policy was put together back in the 90s at CalPERS. Actually, Greg Nyland, when it was at CalPERS at the time, was instrumental in the writing of the first policy, and that was done for the single-family home program that was put in place by CalPERS. When CalSTRS adopted the policy and put it in place here, we, not having a single-family development program at the time, utilized the policy more for the management of our real estate portfolio and the asset management of the real estate portfolio. So it really affected the operations of the commercial real estate that we owned at the time. In the past 5 years, we've added a lot of development to our portfolio, and so the policy also has affected the development of the real estate assets. The other reason it affects real estate more than other product types or other investment types is because of the control. Real estate investments, we typically have in at least portions of our portfolio controlling interest in an asset or in a joint venture that manages the real estate. And therefore, we can implement a policy like the responsible contracting policy, where in the stock portfolio and the private equity portfolio, for the most part, you have a minority interest in not having a controlling interest. And that's why the responsible contracting policy has historically been with the real estate portfolio. So this is the first review of the policy after having the policy in place for, I believe, around 13 or 14 years. we started the process in September. And actually, it was a good time to review the policy over the last 6 months. There's a little bit of serendipity. CalPERS is going through the same review of their policy at the same time, so we were able to share experiences and track records with what's happened with both of our policies, so that was helpful. In addition, PCA was doing a review with CalPERS, so we were able to get their experience and their review of the CalPERS policy as they reviewed it. In addition, we had our, during that time frame, we actually had our first time we had a formal, what do we call that? Challenge to our policy? A formal complaint to our policy. And so we went that through the process as well. So it allowed us to look at the issues with respect to how we address complaints in our policy with an actual one during that same time frame. So that was helpful. So our process was in September. We came to the board in October. We had a number of conference calls with both labor and our partner representatives. We had 4 total calls back and forth and compared and contrast the issues. And in November, we had the first reading, and this is the second reading. Between November and February, there were 2 unions that had significant input and have regular conversations with us, representing labor, LIUNA and SEIU, and they had some specific issues that we addressed, and those are kind of touched on in the document. One other thing I'd like to point out is in all the conversations, the policy itself was never really in question. There was not a lot of formal complaints about the policy and the language of the policy, some suggestions. But most of the conversation quickly talked about implementation of the policy and the use of the policy and those issues. So when you look at the policy changes, they're not that significant, but there was a lot of significant conversation with respect to how we implement the policy, and Greg will be touching on that.
So what we learned, if the adage about real estate, what we learned is the adage about real estate is all about location, location, location. We now know, and we have known, but we know even better is that implementation of a responsible contracting policy is all about communication, communication, communication. And we believe that those efforts are important and will be ongoing. Our strategy will be enhanced, particularly as we introduce and we have new partners, getting them on board early and making sure that they're fully engaged in our policy and understand it. And that when we have a complaint, we've had one in our history that Mike alluded to, and it actually gave us a chance to develop our policy around what that process should be. So we now have a better defined process for addressing complaints as they come forward. Next slide. So what we are suggesting we implement is CalSTRS hosts a job board website, and we will post, our partners will post new projects as they come into existence and will be widely publicized. They have an outreach program, but we wanted to make sure that everyone had equal access to that. It will also serve as a monitoring tool to assure that our business partners are, in fact, posting to the job board. Again, it's communications, it's our ongoing efforts to help our business partners understand the importance of this policy to CalSTRS as a system and to us as a business partner. And our partners are buying in. The ones that we've had our interaction with, they understand the importance of the policy and are certainly engaged in the policy and are supportive of our efforts, as we believe our friends in labor are as well.
The other thing I'd like to point out, it's also a growing portion of our portfolio. As we move the portfolio to more core assets, we're increasing the number of wholly owned assets and increasing the number of investments we're making through joint ventures. So the amount of assets that are applicable to the policy has probably doubled over the last 5 to 6 years, and will likely increase more so than the fund investing that we have had done in the past.
We would not be here today without the engagement and input of the labor representatives as well as our business partners, and we're grateful for all the support and input they've given us.
So with that, we'll open it up for questions.
Dana?
My first question on the job board website, who actually would then operate the website and who would post to it? Who operates the website and who posts to it? And if it's us, do we have the staff to do so?
Gene has been engaged, as I mentioned, with our IT staff, and they believe that they can weave this into their work plan. They have some other important things that they need to get accomplished for CalSTRS, but we understand that they will be able to weave this into their work plan, so we plan on hosting it. Our sister fund does it a different way. They have each of their managers do it to the cost of somewhere $50,000 to $100,000 per, and we believe that we can do that. And then we have, everybody's presenting the language the exact same way, so that it's equal access specifically in the same format each way. Our partners will post to the website, and then labor will have access to it. The implementation, how that website gets designed, that's why we've got a young person like Gene and not Mike and I figuring that out.
It's called the internet.
The internet.
And I think we already host one of those already, right? The 403B compare runs it, and some 403B compare runs in the similar manner, I think. So we already have one that we host, so that wouldn't be unusual for us. Alrighty, as long as we have the staffing to do it, I'm not concerned.
So 403B is a different funding source, a different avenue, but,
Oh,
and
no,
then we
no,
haven't
I
hit
think
this
it's
from a
just-
budget
yeah.
standpoint, obviously. I think you approved a small little IT project yesterday.
Yeah, just a
Yeah. So I'm gonna guess this has got to take a back seat to that,
Yeah.
but this will be on our list to do.
Okay, thank you.
Sharon, I just want to add,
Yeah, no, Brian.
the first bullet point on the, and we're talking about the website and getting this information out, is also in response to the findings of the appeal process. So when the appeal was concluded, it was recommended that there be a greater outreach to our business partners and to labor. And this was staff's follow-up to that and their solution, which certainly fits with what the appeals process requested.
All right, and then I have,
Yeah, go ahead.
do you want to get into the actual wording of the policy?
Sure, you would like.
I have a couple grammatical things, but I can talk to you about that offline. So on IMV 36, under item 5, A, that's the policy shall apply to all applicable investments. The policy shall not apply to investments such as hybrid debt, opportunity funds, ventures with public companies, and other investments where CalSTRS has greater than 100% ownership or the full control of the investment. Isn't that, shouldn't the not be stricken from that sentence?
correct.
Okay,
Despite reading this 500 times, we cut it on the 501st time after it gone to print. We understand the intent of it. With your indulgence, if we're requesting the policy be approved, if that's, we can make that change. We know what the intent is. We can make that one.
it's the opposite
Yeah,
of that, right?
yeah.
Alrighty, and then, this is under Appendix 2. And if you think it's clear enough, then it's not something that I'm too hung up on. But where it talks about step 4 with the analysis, it talks about during the analysis phase that staff's going to determine if the property in question is subject to the responsible contractor policy. And if it does not, we're gonna get back in touch with the complainant and tell them it doesn't. The next step, step 5, is if it does, then the staff makes a recommendation to the responsible contractor policy review committee. I'm just wondering if we need to say that in step 4. Just to make sure that it's very plain, that if during that analysis phase, staff determines that the property is subject to the RCP, that it gets forwarded on to a review committee.
That's easy. Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I had a couple with the appendices, not the plural. Will those all be online fillable documents as well as kind of paper? And people can access that on the website?
We plan to put it on.
Okay. And then in PCA's write-up, I wanted to ask, there was kind of on INV 50, that last paragraph, talking about the coverage of the RCP and that the total real estate covered by the RCP is 16% compared to 59% for CalPERS, and that it's due to the requirement the RCP apply only to investments owned 100% by CalSTRS. And we're changing that, correct? Or
That's
and
correct.
being changed to what? What percentage? From 100% to what?
Any
Fif-
greater than 50.
Greater than 50. Okay. So any real estate.
A rough estimate of how much of that portfolio that would cover of ours?
Microphone.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. A rough estimate of how that would change, the
Number-wise?
percentage of the portfolio of ours is covered would be somewhere between 50 and 55% currently.
So we go from 16% to over 50%?
That's correct.
Okay, of our real estate covered by the RCP. Okay. Any other? I did want to, since we have Marguerite Young from SEIU, I know that you and other labor groups were involved in the process, so did you want to speak from the microphone, Marguerite?
Yeah. Marguerite Young, SEIU Capital Stewardship. First, I want to just say on these other items, I'm very excited about the discussion around incorporating sustainability and hope to be a part of that as you go forward. And because we see the responsible contractor policy as one of the first steps that CalSTRS took towards incorporating sustainability into the management of risk in its portfolio many years ago, and that it's become a fundamental part of the culture of CalSTRS and risk management as much as the 21 risk factors. We come to this process as a union as well that has members in public pension across the river and around the country, and for the folks that actually work in this building. And so when we have engaged in the conversation about the responsible contractor policy, it's through that lens as much as the lens of the workers who we represent, who clean and secure the buildings that CalSTRS owns. And so sometimes we may seem like we're overreaching, but it's to protect our members, but it's always with the intent that we're also trying to help the system better manage the risks and increase value. We're pretty happy with the process that took place and appreciate Mike and Greg in hosting the couple of meetings and the conversations that we've had, and we support the revisions. I do want to point out a couple things that especially we think it makes total sense to lower the threshold to where you have majority ownership, and strongly support that. We think the job board is a great opportunity to take the state of the art a little bit farther, and hope that you'll also consider adding links to union-based resources that list responsible contractors, which we have one of. We do have also adding the complaint process, self-certification makes sense. We'd like to see, and to some, I don't think I brought it up early on, is that in the complaint process, I noticed there's not a whistleblower provision. And it seems like if a worker's bringing forward a complaint at a property, as unusual as that might be, they should be protected from any kind of, sort of retaliation associated with that. And I don't think that would be anything that would be controversial. So maybe it could just be incorporated as practice. And as the job board I do think that the job board will help foster some of that accountability with investment partners, but I'd still like to continue the conversation about how better to monitor the policy given, or the compliance with the policy, given that it is a self-certifying practice. And that's something I think we can make the road by walking, which is in my closing comment. I mean, this policy really underpins is what Greg said: communication. It's about the relationships that we have with each other and our ability to work together to prevent problems before they become full-blown crises. And I've always appreciated the board's and staff's willingness to engage us on, our 10 janitors, in one building, or a whole city full of security officers in another. So I think that's something that I count on, and even when the road's rocky, I know you guys are there to listen and appreciate that. I also have a statement from the Building Trades Council that I'm just going to turn over. They had a couple of comments that they'd like to see included in the policy, including adding something around project labor agreements and registered apprenticeships. So I think they're maybe, so I'll hand those over to you. But I promised I would say something. So thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Great. Excellent. So this is an action item, so I would entertain a motion to approve the RCP.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Great. Thank you so much for your work, both of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, we are 11B, Solange, diversity.
Thanks,
and-
Greg.
Do you want to take a break?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Solange, 5 minutes, is that okay?
5 minutes would be perfect.
5-minute break, Solange, so we'll get started at 2:55. Thanks.
Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You want me to bring you my grammatical?
Good afternoon. Diversity and
As I said, I'm here to present the report, the progress report for the Investments Diversity Team, and to give you an idea as to what we're doing, and we've made progress in many areas as indicated in the report, and it's all consistent with the board-approved business and strategic plans. I would like to point out a couple of areas that we're particularly proud of. These are very general, but the one area that we're very proud of is that we have a continued nationwide reputation. We have, over time, we have built a great name across the country for our efforts in the diversity space, and we continue to be strong in that area. We are viewed as experts in this area, in emerging managers in the diversity area, and other pension plans have come to us to find out how we're implementing our programs and what we're doing, and to take some ideas back to their own programs, or to create their own programs. So the highlight, you might say, well, what's so different about ours? And the highlight of our diversity efforts is that we make all investments in the normal course of business. We follow a business and a strategic plan, and we're steady and careful. And the big surprise for a lot of folks is that the direction comes from the board, the direction comes from the top, and it is not a one and done issue. It is rather interwoven into all the asset classes, and it's ongoing. So we have, which takes another very positive effect, and that is consistency. People know that we're here, that we're going to apply the same fiduciary considerations and the same level of due diligence to all of our investments. So that is a very, very good area, and I think that we all are very proud of that. But the other area is that we just don't talk about it. we have a highly diverse and talented staff. And we utilize this report to highlight some of the accomplishments. You will see that we tell you who has achieved CFA designation. We tell you about recognitions that are made in the industry. And we want, like the Rising Star from Institutional Investor. So we tell you what your staff is doing. We are very diverse. We have 50% men, 50% women, which is great, and also in the ethnic, racial, and background diversity, we're about 43% of our staff, so that's significant for a California organization. And one of the most important points, I think, is that staff is engaged. You will see that staff speaks at various events and organizations across the country, that people are excited to work for CalSTRS, and that they know the vision and mission of the organization. And this is quite unique from other pension plans. So obviously we have some challenges as well, and you probably are aware of some of them. I think the biggest one that I can mention is direct allocations. The state procurement process makes it very difficult for us to transition manager relationships from a manager of managers program to a direct relationship in global equity. It is, the manager of managers, the fund of funds serve us very well, but there is that transition that we are looking at, and we're trying to find, a way to do that. And then another challenge that has been already spoken about earlier today is that active management. Active management is hard for everybody, for the small emerging managers and for the large established funds. And when the small managers do not beat their index, it's sometimes necessary to make the hard choice of pulling money, and that has a completely different external pressure that comes with that. But it is a balance, and we are working hard and making sure that we consider everything. We want to make sure that we keep a communication, very open communication with our partners, and that it is straightforward and it's done in a respectful manner. So I ask for your approval of this report so that we can submit it to the legislature as required by the statutes. In addition, if you have any questions, please, we have the investment diversity team with us.
Kind of the spirit of John Chung, could the DMI stand up and could we see who they are? And
Yes, absolutely.
Are they here? Everybody on the team? A few of them. I think a lot of them, frankly, are upstairs, and certainly the daily trading team would have left by 3.
So your question should be in real
they
estate and
started at
global
5 a.m.
equities.
Okay, got it. Okay. But we can see their signatures and their names
Yes.
at the end
There
of the
is,
report if
I
you want to take a
I
look.
feel bad, but yeah,
That's
it
okay.
is a broad team. It's a young team. I would tell you what's interesting is a lot of the IO2s and IO3s are the ones that, again, I said it the other day on Wednesday, our Gen Xers and our millennials are the ones that really have an interest in volunteering on this. And Solange leads the team, and it's very diverse, and there is a representative or two from every single asset class.
Any questions from board members? This is an action item, so I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Great, it's approved. Thanks so much, Solange, appreciate it.